The average home gardener loses a third of their spring harvest. Not to pests, not to weather, to sequence mistakes made before anything touches soil. And the reason most people miss this is because every gardening guide treats spring like a single event. Last frost passes, everything goes in. But spring is not one starting gun. It is a sequence of overlapping biological timelines. And when you compress those timelines into one productive weekend, you create friction that compounds for months. The real mistake is not planting the wrong things. It is planting the right crops at the wrong time, in the wrong order, without any structural plan for what happens next. That one mistake turns July into constant pruning, awkward harvesting, collapsing airflow, and pulling plants early just to regain control. Today, I am going to walk you through a spring framework, phase by phase, that does not just get things planted, it prevents the chaos most gardeners spend all summer trying to fix. Here is the hidden psychological mistake behind most chaotic gardens. We design for what we see instead of what is coming. In early spring, everything is small. A tomato transplant is 6 inches tall. A zucchini seedling fits in your hand. Beds look spacious. Pathways feel wide. It feels like you have room for everything, so you fill it. But a tomato that looks modest in April can occupy 3 feet of width and 6 feet of height by July. Zucchini expands aggressively in all directions. Cucumbers climb beyond their assigned trellis. Picture a 4x8 raised bed. In April, you place 2 tomato plants, a zucchini, a few pepper starts, and a row of lettuce along the front edge. It looks perfect. There is visible space between everything. You can reach every plant easily. Now, fast forward 10 weeks. Those 2 tomatoes are each 3 feet wide and caged. The zucchini has claimed half the bed. The peppers are buried under tomato canopy, fighting for light. The lettuce bolted weeks ago because airflow disappeared. You did not overplant. You underprojected. That is the difference. And it is invisible in spring. When spacing decisions are made based on April scale instead of July scale, you create overlap. Overlap reduces airflow. Reduced airflow increases humidity and fungal pressure. Fungal pressure forces pruning, which changes sun exposure and shifts growth direction. And suddenly your balanced layout becomes a tangled canopy that demands constant correction. But the deeper issue is not plant biology. It is movement. If you cannot comfortably access every plant without stepping into beds, maintenance declines. If harvesting requires bending through vines or moving cages, you harvest less frequently. If irrigation lines run through high-traffic zones, they get adjusted repeatedly and eventually ignored. Chaos does not start with plant failure. It starts with friction. And friction begins with layout decisions made before growth accelerates. 4 to 6 weeks before last frost is the most undervalued window in the entire season. Nothing looks urgent, nothing looks wrong, which is exactly why it determines everything. This is the architectural phase, and it has 3 anchors: soil readiness, bed zoning, and expansion modeling. Soil readiness is not about adding compost the day you plant. It is about stabilizing conditions before roots rely on them. Test drainage by digging a 12-inch hole and timing water infiltration. Break compaction while moisture is workable. Add compost early enough for microbial communities to integrate before roots demand nutrient exchange. When transplants stall for 2 weeks after planting, it is rarely shock. It is soil that was not ready. Roots enter an unstable environment and pause. That pause compresses the entire growing window. Bed zoning must be assigned before any planting occurs. Cool season beds should be positioned for easy removal and turnover. Warm season beds go in highest sun exposure zones. Succession beds should sit closest to access paths for rapid replanting. If you bury short-term crops inside long-term zones, you create removal friction that cascades into overlap. The final anchor is expansion modeling. Every plant must be assigned a mature footprint before it goes in the ground. Height, width, root spread. When 2 mature footprints intersect aggressively, you are scheduling competition. Spring is not about filling space. It is about allocating future volume. 3 to 4 weeks before last frost, the system begins its first visible phase, The cool season window. Most casual gardeners wait for warmth. Structured gardeners move in the cold. Lettuce, spinach, kale, peas, radishes, carrots, and beets do not just tolerate cool soil, they prefer it. They germinate reliably when temperatures are still below what warm season crops require. Cool air slows bolting and improves flavor. But their greatest value is not taste. It is sequencing leverage. While cool season crops establish, the warm season crops are still indoors building root mass. Attention is not divided. Irrigation demand is low. Weed pressure is manageable. And here is where most gardeners either gain advantage or create future friction. Every cool season crop must serve two purposes. First, it produces food. Second, it prepares the next occupant. Peas climb trellises that cucumbers will later inherit. Lettuce occupies space that peppers will expand into. Radishes mature quickly and clear space for deeper-rooted carrots. Spinach finishes before tomato canopy closes overhead. When cool season crops are placed without regard for their handoff, removal becomes disruptive. When placed intentionally, they create clean transitions. Here's a concrete example. You plant peas along a trellis in early March. By late May, peas are finishing. You pull them, leave the trellis standing, and plant cucumber starts at the base the same week. The cucumber inherits a climbing structure, nitrogen-enriched soil from the pea roots, and a bed that has been actively managed for 3 months. Zero downtime. Zero wasted infrastructure. That is what an intentional handoff looks like. Spring is a relay race. The baton must pass before the next runner accelerates. If the handoff fails, if cool season crops linger too long or warm season crops enter too early, overlap becomes compression. Compression becomes humidity. Humidity becomes disease. All of it avoidable in March. Now we address infrastructure because most chaos is architectural, not botanical. Bed width should rarely exceed 4 feet if accessed from both sides because the average comfortable reach is about 24 inches. Anything wider forces stepping into soil. Pathways should be no less than 2 feet wide at maturity, not at planting. If they feel narrow in April, they will disappear by June. Irrigation should be mapped before planting begins. Drip lines must account for mature root zones, not seedling placement, and trellis systems must be installed before plants demand support. A trellis installed after vines have begun climbing is already late. Reactive structure always introduces friction, and friction compounds faster than growth. There is another layer most gardeners ignore entirely: maintenance load forecasting. Every plant carries not just yield potential, but time demand. Indeterminate tomatoes require weekly pruning and tying. Cucumbers demand consistent training. Squash requires regular inspection for vine borers. If you plant 5 high-maintenance crops simultaneously, you schedule 5 simultaneous maintenance peaks. When those peaks collide, something gets neglected. Staggering warm season plantings by 1 to 2 weeks is not just about soil temperature. It is about distributing maintenance demand across time instead of concentrating it. Finally, the July stress test. Before planting anything, stand at the edge of your garden and imagine it at full maturity. Tomato vines heavy with fruit. Squash leaves spanning 3 feet. Beans climbing overhead. Now ask, can I move through this space carrying a full basket without stepping into beds? Can air circulate between major crops? Can I remove one crop without disturbing 3 others? If the answer is uncertain, redesign before planting. Spring is the only moment when redesign is cheap. Last frost week arrives, and this is where most gardeners undo their own structure. The weather feels good. Garden centers are full. The instinct is to plant everything at once. But last frost week is not planting week, it is transition week. Your cool season crops are still producing. Lettuce still has life. Peas are climbing. Pulling them prematurely wastes the sequencing advantage you built. This week focuses on 3 things: hardening off transplants, finalizing irrigation, and confirming bed readiness. Warm season crops need at least 7 days of gradual outdoor exposure. Shade first. Partial sun next. Full exposure last. Skip this and transplant shock steals 2 weeks from your season. While transplants harden, install trellises and cages. Lay mulch in pathways before weeds establish. Adjust drip lines while beds are still accessible. Transition week is about stabilization, not volume. Once frost risk is gone, launch in phases. Week 1 after last frost belongs to tomatoes and peppers. These are long-season structural crops that will dominate vertical space for months. They need every available warm day to produce a full harvest, so they go in first. Plant tomatoes deeply. Bury them up to the first set of true leaves. They will root along the buried stem and establish faster than shallow-planted transplants. Install supports immediately. A cage or stake added on day 1 trains growth direction from the start. A cage added 3 weeks later is already fighting the plant's chosen path. Direction established early prevents chaos later. Week 2 is for squash, cucumbers, and beans. Your soil is warmer now and nighttime temperatures have stabilized, which means germination improves and early growth accelerates instead of stalling. Direct sow beans and squash rather than transplanting. They resent root disturbance and perform better when they germinate in place. Week 3 is for true heat lovers: melons, sweet potatoes, okra. These crops genuinely need warm soil to perform. Rushing them into week 1 gains nothing. They sit dormant in cool ground while their roots struggle. Staggering protects your time. When everything is planted on one weekend, everything demands attention at once. When staggered maintenance peaks are distributed, the garden feels manageable instead of overwhelming. By weeks 4 to 6, growth accelerates. This is where systems either hold or collapse. Cool season crops are finishing. You'd remove them cleanly and immediately. Do not let spent plants linger. Every finished crop occupying space restricts airflow and delays succession. Replant those areas with bush beans, quick greens, or planned rotations. Empty soil is wasted sunlight. Monitor canopy layering. Remove lower tomato leaves once fruit sets to improve airflow. Redirect squash vines before they invade pathways. Prune slightly early rather than slightly late. If airflow feels tight, it already is. Small weekly adjustments prevent dramatic mid-season corrections. Watering becomes the hidden stability factor. Inconsistent watering creates more mid-season problems than pathogens do. When soil swings between saturated and dry, roots weaken. Weak roots mean stressed plants. Stressed plants attract problems. Deep, consistent irrigation is essential. Drip systems reduce leaf wetness and humidity spikes. Water early in the day and check moisture below the surface. A dry top does not mean dry soil 6 inches down. If you water only when plants look stressed, your system is already unstable. Succession planting is the yield multiplier. Instead of planting lettuce or bush beans once, plant them every 2 to 3 weeks. This smooths harvest peaks and prevents glut followed by nothing. It also distributes maintenance workload. When everything matures at once, harvest becomes frantic. When maturity is staggered, rhythm replaces rush. Mark succession dates on a calendar. Memory drifts. Calendars anchor. Around week 6 to 8, perform a structural audit. Walk slowly through the garden and ask 4 questions. Is airflow intact between major crops? Are pathways still usable at full stride? Is irrigation uniform across all beds? And what is your fall plan? If you want fall brassicas, start them in midsummer. That planning happens now, not when temperatures drop. Protect your margin. Do not allow every square foot to become permanently occupied. Leave small, flexible zones. This is your 10% insurance policy. Crops fail. Pests happen. Weather shifts. Margin absorbs volatility. Without it, stress compounds. With it, adaptation is simple. Here's what most people do not realize about structured gardening. It compounds. Year 1. You are learning the sequence. You will make mistakes. That is fine. But because you built a system instead of improvising, you can see exactly what failed and why. Year 2, you adjust spacing based on what you actually observed. You know which handoffs worked. Your trellises are already in place. Year 3, the garden almost runs itself. You are not redesigning, you are refining. That is the power of structure over improvisation. Improvisation resets every season. Structure accumulates, When this sequence is respected, transition discipline, staggered launch, intentional removal, consistent irrigation, succession rhythm, structural audits, and protected margin, something subtle happens. The garden feels calm at peak growth. Harvesting becomes efficient. Movement stays intuitive. Disease pressure drops. You stop reacting to growth, you direct it. That is the difference between gardening as effort and gardening as system. Effort fluctuates, systems compound. Design for July and March. Sequence before enthusiasm. Because growth is predictable, chaos is predictable. The difference between the two is structure.